welcome to the Paintboard channel. My name is Paige and I am so excited to be here. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to create watercolor flowers. We are going to be learning how to do some roses, some poppies, and my all-time favorite, summer flower. Alright, so let's go over supplies and what you'll need to create your beautiful watercolor flowers. So you will need some brushes. So make sure you have an array of different sizes, shapes. You can use the really tiny brushes for small details, different size round brushes to kind of play around with. That's really important. You will also need a clean cup of water. Really important to make sure that your water is clean throughout this entire process, because if your water is really gross and dirty, then your painting will become really muddy, gross, and dirty. You will need a watercolor palette. This is just a basic student grade watercolor palette. Has a ton of different colors to play around with. So when you're first starting out, just get the cheapest that you can find. And if you become really into watercolors and you want to explore more, then you can kind of upgrade and get the artist grade watercolors. Alright, then most importantly, you will need some paper to create your masterpiece on. So I am just using cold pressed watercolor paper. Make sure you use watercolor paper. Do not use basic printer paper, because printer paper will wrinkle, it will create holes, and it just won't be able to hold the amount of water that you're going to be using. Alright, let's get painting. Alright, so I'm going to take my paintbrush, I'm going to dunk it into my cup of water. I'm going to find a shade of pink that I like. I'm going to kind of swirl it around. And then to start off, I'm going to do a little swirl, kind of like a backwards C. Just a little swirl. I'm going to dunk my paintbrush into my water cup, because what's really cool about watercolors is that the more water you use, it spreads the pigment around and it creates a lighter shade. Swirl it around to spread it all over the page. So now with the same brush, I'm going to just rinse it off, and I actually want to use a darker shade of pink, not as much water this time. Kind of just swirling around to fill in my rose. I like to leave a little bit of white space to kind of make your eye move around the rose. So as you can see, I have a little bit of white here, and kind of around the rose itself. So I like to let this dry, then I can always go back and add more colors on top of it. I'm going to make a bigger one, so I'm going to grab a different brush. I like this purple. Alright, so this brush is kind of more tapered, which just creates a thinner line. So I am going to do the same thing. I'm going to make a little bit of a swirl, kind of creating a slight C shape. Again, I'm leaving a little bit of white space in between this swirl. And again, keep in mind that the harder you press down on the brush, the thicker the brush stroke will be. So you can see in this rose, I didn't use as much water, which creates a really cool texture. It kind of shows the paper in the background. I'm going to go back to my first rose, my pink rose. So you'll notice I used a ton of water in this one compared to this one. I'm going to go back to this rose, so I'm going to use the same pink, maybe a little bit of orange to show some contrast. Alright, and then I'm going to just go on top of what I did to see what happens. So I'm swirling. I'm not using as much water, because again, I like that look. So clean off your paintbrush. I'm going to show you how to do a more closed, tighter rose. Let's do blue. Let's go crazy. I'm going to start with, again, same type of swirl. I'm swirling outwards and then continuing the swirl all the way in. So again, remember to leave space. Re-dip into your paint, and then to make it look like you're looking at it from the bottom edge, I kind of just push it harder down and then kind of just pull it across. So it kind of looks like it is coming down, and right here is where the stem would be. If you want to add more color, add it right on top. So you want to keep in mind, the water controls the paint. So if you use a lot of water, it tends to bleed, or maybe you'll get a blob of water that you don't want, which if that actually happens, I'll show you. So if you have a little bit of water, say you're like, oh my gosh, water spilled on my flower, I hate it, what do? You just kind of take your paper towel, you dab it, and you can kind of lift up some color. So keep in mind, don't be too hard on yourself. This is just a very basic intro to watercolors. If you find that water's going in places that you don't want it to go, if paint is mixing together, don't be too hard on yourself. We're here to have fun. And just kind of test it out. See what works and see what doesn't work. Right now I'm just going to add some leaves to the side of my roses just to make the flowers look more natural and I think prettier, because they look kind of random and floating on my piece of paper. So I'm going to take my paintbrush. I'm going to pick one of my favorite greens. So if you see where the two roses come together, that would be a great place to put a leaf. my paintbrush down, kind of pull it like a rainbow shape until it tapers off. And then I'm going to create the other side. Same thing. Totally up to you if you want to leave a little bit of space or fill in the whole entire leaf. Doesn't matter. Whatever you like. Again, test it out. See what works for you. I've now added my leaves to my roses. So you'll notice I layered a few different colors on top of one another to show different contrast and just different texture. When you put the paint down, it will look different than when it dries, so keep that in mind. All right, so for my second flower, I am going to show you how to create a poppy. For the poppy, I'm gonna grab more of a rounder brush. So maybe I'll do a little bit of orange and a little bit of red. I'm going to start with the center of my poppy. I'm just going to create a little circle. I'm actually going to add a few other circles. All right, so just an outline, I have 3 circles, and from the outer edges of the circle, in a circular motion, drag out the watercolor. All right, so I kind of put it down and then just spread my bristles around and if you want to switch up the color, you can always create lighter shades of red or lighter shades of orange. I have a lot of water right there, so I'm just going to take my paper towel, dab it a little bit. I'm going to start to fill in the center. Reminder to make sure your water is nice and clean. All right, so the center of a poppy is usually darker. I'm going to use some dark blue and maybe a tiny bit of purple to start to see how that looks. Now I'm going to go ahead and find the flower that I did first because it is going to be the most dry. All right, so I'm going to start to fill in the center, and I kind of like to dab my paintbrush up and down to give it a little bit of texture, leaving a little bit of white space. All right, so it starts to bleed into the other colors, which is also a cool technique. If you feel like there's too much paint or too much water, make sure to take your paper towel, grab that color off of your piece of paper. Now my flowers are more dry, so I'm going to add maybe some more darker tones to the center to really define my poppy and kind of bring it together. I kind of want to go back towards the flower part, the outer edges. I'm going to find my first flower and just add a darker tone right on top, just to show a little bit of contrast. All right, there you go. So those are my 3 poppies. I'm going to go ahead and add a few leaves and stems. For the leaves, you want to find your favorite green color. Much like the roses, I'm going to find a point where the poppies kind of connect, and that is where you are going to add a leaf. There you go, here are my poppies. So for my final flower, I'm going to teach you how to create a sunflower. So I'm going to be starting with a quick sketch of a circle, dip it into a light brown color, and I'm going to go ahead and just quickly sketch out the center of my sunflower. I'm going to rinse off my paintbrush and dip into some light yellow. Now from the circle that I've created, I'm going to take my paintbrush and just lightly add some petals that go all the way around my brown circle that I created. Very light. I used a lot of water because it's not as powerful. So now this is very light yellow. I like to add some more colors on top of it to create a darker tone. And then again, I'm going to start where I started in the very beginning because it's going to be more dry. And I kind of just flick my paintbrush to create a fun feathered texture. You'll notice that if you put a color right on top of a spot that is very wet, the color will start to bleed and expand, which is really cool. It gives a different type of look. Now I'm going to start to fill in the center. So I'm going to start with a lighter shade of brown. Parts where my yellows and orange are still wet, they're going to bleed a little. Adding some blue in the center, I'm just going to leave a little bit of brown on the outer edge of my circle just so I can see the difference between the 2 colors. Now my paint is very wet, so what I like to do is just add an even darker tone. So I'm using some black and some dark blue for the very center. So that's the kind of the wet on wet technique where your color will really blend. The thing about wet on wet technique is you want to let it dry if you are happy with it. So if you continue to add color upon color, your paper will start to tear. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen. Now I'm going to start to add some leaves to my sunflower. Dip into some greens. And add a stem and some leaves. Alright, so now I'm going to go back into my sunflower, the yellow and orange part, just to add a few final touches, a few darker tones. If you want to add any specific details like lines, highlights, or defining lines, make sure that your paint is dry because that's where you can really get the small little details. So once you're done testing out your watercolors and flowers and kind of getting the hang of what to do and what not to do, you can go ahead and venture and create place cards, greeting cards. You can make different types of frames, frame your pieces of artwork, give them as gifts. Yay, we're done! Look at the finished product. I hope you had so much fun. I know I did. So if you follow along, share a picture of what you've created. Make sure to hashtag TPBArtsy and tag us at the paint bar. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We post videos every single week, so you want to make sure you don't miss out on those. Make sure to comment below, because I am thinking about doing a watercolor tutorial on succulents and little baby cacti. So if you would like to see that tutorial, definitely comment below. This video is going to be part of our watercolor series, and you can find all of the other videos on our watercolor playlist. Bye everyone, until next time.